Hello everybody, so we're back with another close-up on my face, which means we're doing another makeup video. So a lot of people really liked the last one that I made of this. If you didn't catch it, I was just doing a rambly writing update while attempting to do some eyeshadow, and today I'm going to be doing the exact same thing. I once again have my bucket of makeup, I have my handheld mirror from Dollarama, and I'm ready to go. I even washed my hair for this, so let's get started. So today I'm going to be doing an eye look that's inspired by my novel Feeding Habits, and the color scheme for Feeding Habits, I'll pop up the illustrated book cover that I made for it, is green and gold. While I do that, I'm going to be talking about, things I love about Feeding Habits, because Feeding Habits and we have a relationship. So let's get started. I'm going to take these off. So first I'm going to start with the eyeshadow like I did last time. And once again, I will be priming with my Maybelline Instant Age Rewind Concealer. If y'all didn't know, I have been writing a book called Feeding Habits since April of 2020. As I'm filming this, we're almost halfway through June 2021. So it's been over a year since I've been writing Feeding Habits, and it has been an experience. So if you didn't know already, here's the rundown on what Feeding Habits is. Feeding Habits is book 2 of the Mothwork duology, which is a spin-off of a 6-book series that I've been writing for the last 7 years called Fostered. Feeding Habits wasn't supposed to exist. I mean, in general, Mothwork wasn't supposed to exist either, but I had randomly one day decided I'm gonna write this book because I am not going to lie, I was having a mental health crisis and I needed something to cheer me up. Feeding Habits was born. I actually had planned for Mothwork to just be a standalone, but of course I'm the queen of writing series, so this book started in the point of view of my favorite character that I've ever created. His name is Lonan. I really liked, writing his first chapter, but very quickly after I wrote the first chapter, the book started giving me an extremely hard time after chapter 2. So I'm gonna actually start with a few of the colors now that I've primed the eyelid. I don't really know what to begin with, to be honest. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use this color in this palette. This is the Opposites Attract palette by e.l.f. Like I said, I'm going to use this yellow color. It's called Happy, and I'm going to use that as the transition shade because I'm hoping to get like some gold. I was not expecting it to go bad so fast. I really actually, like I said, needed a project that was going to kind of cheer me up and be there for me. I took a very long time to write it, and it's not done yet. I've hit the goal at last of writing 50,000 words. I had made a goal to hit 50,000 words in July, and I hit 50,000 words in January of 2021. So you can see it was not going the way that I expected. I tried to put my heart and soul into this book, but there was just this distance between it and I. Every time I would write it, I would actually feel like what I was writing was terrible. Like, it was not me being not objective about my work. I genuinely felt like, no, this has to be real. There can't be another truth besides the one that I'm terrible and everything that I'm writing, every single chapter, is bad. That's not something that I feel like we talk a lot about, how projects can kind of flip-flop like that, or how our expectations can really throw us for a loop. I'm trying my best to, enjoy this process, but the book out of nowhere is kind of throwing me a curveball, right? I tried to work through the problems with Feeding Habits, but I couldn't. Every single chapter I wrote was difficult. In a lot of ways, I feel like I forgot how difficult writing chapters 3 to 5 were, because I always say like that writing Harrison's point of view has been the hardest thing ever, and the book is in 2 points of view. I would always say like, I really miss Lonan. Harrison is such a pain in the ass to write with, right? And I would always say that. You can go on my blog and there's probably me bitching about Harrison's point of view because guys, it was horrible. But I feel like in a lot of ways I did forget that actually writing in Lonan's head was miserable as well. So I actually didn't have any fun writing this book after chapter 2. It was just a struggle beyond that. And speaking of struggle, I am very much struggling with this. Really, I'm just trying to set myself up for success for the future so that I can have a bit of like a halo around the green, but like it's not really working the way that I thought it would. So I think I am going to switch to like a deeper red, the deeper red in this, and I'll do that in the crease. So TLDR, feeding habits sucks. Where am I right now? So I am currently trying to write the last chapter of the book, and the last chapter of the book, chapter 10, is called Swan Song. I believe what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make it kind of like a novella, so it'll be just an extremely long chapter. At this point in time, I believe it's already pretty long. I think it's probably like 6,000 words or something. And so I've been writing Swan Song for months. Okay, so if it helps, this is the timeline of feeding habits. April to June 2020, I was writing Lonan's point of view. And then June to December of 2020, I was writing Harrison's point of view. And then January till now, I've been writing Lonan's point of view. And to be fair, since the semester started, which is in January for me, I haven't really written much feeding habits, to be fair. I just don't have time to write things. I'm a writing major. Like, girl, you do not have time to write anything. Whenever you write a book, I mean, especially me, like, I like to have fun. I'm the kind of person who wants to have fun with everything they're doing. You want to have fun. You don't want to be having a difficult time when you're writing a book, but that was not me in feeding habits. I was not having fun. And you know what? I still am struggling to have fun because it's just been very difficult. I cannot even tell you why. It's not like I think I'm a terrible writer, because while I was writing feeding habits, I was also writing stories that I love, like short stories. But it's this project in particular that when I write it, every single line, I'm like, yeah, this is not good. And later I'll come back and I'll reread it and I'll be like, this is great. What was I thinking? But I don't do that with any other project. And I think that might be because I have a deep-rooted insecurity with anything Mothwork related. So Mothwork was like kind of the first thing that I didn't write that was, it was not literary, basically. And I'd been writing literary fiction for like a year and a half at that point. And so I felt like, oh, I need to keep writing super literary stuff. Literary. So I'm not trying to drag literary if you also write literary. But, you know, I've also been having a huge difficulty with writing literary fiction lately because, you know, I'm a woman of color. It's really hard for me to find literary fiction written by other women of color that aren't about like issues. Not that those stories aren't great, because I've read fantastic like culture stories, issue stories that are really important. Your girl has been suffering with the racial trauma like lately, so I just can't handle books like that right now. So if you have recommendations, let me know. So, you know, the last few weeks I've been really struggling, like, where do I even fit in literary fiction? And so I think in general, I've always really prided myself on being a literary fiction writer. I've always loved that I am a literary fiction writer. It's something that I extremely enjoy and that I would never change the world for, because I love lit fic. But I think because Feeding Habits, Mothwork, you know, particularly Mothwork, which is the first book, started off not at all anything literary. Feeding Habits is much more literary. I would define it as literary fiction. I don't know, I've had like some sort of an insecurity with it since the beginning of time. And so Feeding Habits didn't really have much of a chance, to be fair. I'm gonna blend this green out now so it just looks not as crazy. So those are a few thoughts on where I'm at with Feeding Habits. It has not been very easy, I'm not gonna lie, and sit here while I'm blending my eyeshadow and be like, guys, writing this book has been the best decision I ever made. I regret writing Feeding Habits a lot because, you know, I'm very mean to myself about it. I regret sharing a lot of Feeding Habits because now I feel like there's expectation, even though every single time I share it, you guys love it. But there's one thing about like uploading those chapters, because I do share the audiobook chapters, is a very terrible experience for me. Like, I have been since like about chapter 2, like literally since after, even the first one was hard for me to post. I don't know, it's just really difficult for me to post those chapters. I don't know why, but you know, everybody asks for more and I love sharing it on my blog, but I think because I really don't like listening to my voice read, and then the fact that it's Feeding Habits, which is like this non-literary book that is kind of trying to be literary, that, you know, is the first thing that kind of brought me out of my comfort zone. I feel some type of way about it. Like, I feel incredibly like nervous to share Feeding Habits. But while I do regret it, like I also don't, because I love having shared that project with you. And everybody loves it so much on this channel. So it's nothing that anybody else has told me. It's like, it's literally, it's not you, it's me kind of situation. It's so me. With that being said, I'm going to tell you the reasons why I love it. And it's so hard to talk about the positives and not talk about the negatives, because I feel like, you know, a majority of my experience with feeding habits has been negative. So I'm like, let me just talk about the negatives. But let's talk for a second about why I love my book. I think it's really important that I hear this from myself. By the way, I'm warming up the eyeshadow look with this warmer green, because the other one's kind of like darker blue base, so I want it to be warmer, just like the feeding habits kind of shade of green. So reason number one why I love this book. Okay, first of all, my boys, but let's get a little bit more specific. Let's talk about Harrison, because I always talk about Lonan. And you know, I love him, but let's talk about Harrison, because he, I think, has changed a lot in this book for worse. So Harrison, if you didn't know, he is, I don't know how old he is. Like, I definitely messed up their ages at one point. It's been 7 years. Like, I don't really remember things properly when it comes to fostered. I think in Feeding Habits, he's 21 turning 22, or he's 22 already. I don't know. I don't know. You know, his chapters start from chapter 6 onward. He is living a really kind of terrible life, in his opinion. It is pretty, I think, similar in a lot of ways to how a lot of us are living in 2021 and even 2020, obviously, where everybody was just at home all the time. Nobody went outside, and we didn't see anybody, and we didn't talk to anybody at all. And, you know, that was necessary because it was a pandemic, and, you know, there's still a pandemic going on. I'm living life kind of like how Harrison lives life at the beginning of Feeding Habits. So he has just recently reconnected with his biological mother. Her name is Susanna. When he was a kid, he had a really great relationship with his mother, but at the same time, she had a lot of struggles herself. She struggles with the alcohol addiction, and at one point in Harrison's childhood, that really takes over, and she is no longer able to, you know, be there for him. And so when he's a kid, she leaves him. And, you know, when he was young, he had a really good relationship with her. But by the time he's like, I can't remember the exact age, again, I would have to check my notes, but, you know, up until like late childhood to his teen, he doesn't see his mother. And it's really hard for him, because he is a mama's boy, and he loves his mother very much, but at the same time he carries a lot of resentment, and I mean, duly, to be fair, like, he totally deserves to carry those feelings about his mother and what happened in you know, their relationship. He really cannot find it in him to forgive her. In Mothwork, Lonan finds his mother, and Lonan knows a lot about, you know, Harrison's relationship with his mother, a lot more than I know. They basically meet up through chance. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's literally chance that they meet up. I'm gonna use this like metallic green in the palette now, and I'm gonna kind of put it on the edge, and then I'll do the cut crease. And at the end of Mothwork, if you haven't watched the All About My Novel Mothwork, Lonan and Harrison split up. They just have a terrible relationship in Mothwork that they need a break from each other, because it's not good for either of them. So Harrison goes to move in with his mother. She lives in Las Vegas, but together they move back to, you know, their hometown, which they both live in Brooklyn, New York. In Feeding Habits, that's where Harrison is. He's living in Brooklyn, except he is having a mental health crisis. He honestly doesn't leave his house. He doesn't talk to anybody besides his mother, and he, you know, rarely does that anyway, because he's not having a good time by any means. I didn't know that there was a side to Harrison that could react in this way, like, who could suffer. I've always aligned myself with Lonan, because Lonan and I think we handle situations quite similarly, whatever that means about me. When I was writing Feeding Habits, and all of a sudden, which, you know, quote unquote, all of a sudden, Harrison starts to feel kind of, he's struggling, you know, with his mental health, and he's feeling like he's all alone. I was like, whoa, this is a side of you I have never seen. A side of you that I didn't think I would ever see, that I didn't even know existed. And while I know, like, you know, everybody struggles, and with that, my character struggle, Harrison struggles, I was not expecting it to affect him that much. But, you know, they are, because he He is a human being, and he's really struggling in the beginning. And because of that, this book has been really precious to me because I've been able to see Harrison at his most vulnerable. I always see him as quite a goofy character, like a character who always makes other people smile. He's very passionate, he's very loyal, he loves his friends, and he would do anything to help them. Because of that, he's more of a caretaker than I saw him as somebody who struggles. I saw him as the person who actually goes out of his way to take care of other people, not the person who is taken care of. But feeding habits switch that. And, you know, you see it in Lonan's point of view too, because Lonan, who's always been taken care of by Harrison, now has to take care of somebody else. It's really interesting that their roles reverse, but I love this book for giving me the opportunity to get to know Harrison better on like a really deep human level. I've obviously been writing with him since I was 13. He was 17, so we've gone through a lot, you know, we've been there for each other. But, you know, I never thought of him as, you know, the character that I turned to relate to. But he and I think, dealt with isolation really similarly. Obviously, I was being isolated in the pandemic. I'm not a particularly social butterfly, but I love being with people. That was bringing a toll on us both. And in a lot of ways, it's why it made his chapters so difficult to write, because I never experienced somebody who was so similar, like in such a similar mindset as I was. And, you know, while that made it very difficult to write, it also made it kind of cathartic. Now when I reread it, I'm like, baby, I want to hug you, because, you know, I was there, and obviously I'm kind of almost still there. I'm just gonna clean up like the sides. I'm just gonna do kind of like a clean swipe on the side. Back to talking about feeding habits. So I haven't obviously shared this chapter, but chapter 6 is the first chapter that I write that is in Harrison's point of view. It is, you know, the very first time that I got to see him really in a bit of a struggling state. And it's actually, I think, one of the best things I've written. Somebody who's struggling to be in their 20s and like get their life on track after a breakup, that, you know, he thinks he's handling it when in reality, like in a lot of ways, he can't find himself. The fact that I captured that mood in a chapter, yeah, that's probably the number one thing. One of the number one things that I love about Feeding Habits is it brought me closer to Harrison. And now he's actually a character that I write with a lot, because now he's obviously the main character in Seventh Virtue. And I can't really see myself not writing in his point of view, like when I do write fostered stuff. And it's crazy because obviously he was a huge character in the beginning of the series, but he was like, I never thought, oh, he's going to be my main character. He's going to be the one that I'm exploring primarily. But yeah, no, now he's that. And I'm very happy that I've gotten to get to know him. He's really helped me become the person that I am today. He's taught me a lot about myself and how to just like accept myself and believe in myself. This cut crease is kind of a mess, to be fair, because I don't think I am doing it right. I made an attempt. That's okay. Really quick, because you can see it's kind of already like creasing up there. I'm gonna tap on this like gold onto the eyelid now, just with my finger, so I can get like a lot of opacity. Next thing that I love about Feeding Habits, I love that we get to see how much Lonan yearns for parenthood. Like, whoa, what a thing to learn. Obviously, I feel in a lot of ways that I know my characters. I you know, I would like to think that I know my characters. This is not something I was expecting, despite all the signs pointing straight to it. So there's actually a lot of exploration of fatherhood in Feeding Habits, which you would have seen a bit of in chapter 4 if you listened to it. Lonan has obviously this really terrible relationship with his father, who is not a good person by any means. But because of that, he really struggles to understand his positioning on fatherhood. Like, where do I fit in the occasion of being a father? We get to see this interest of his to care for something, and in particular a child, to live beyond himself and to give his energy. I obviously had a lot of plans for Lonan. You know, for example, I was gonna write the first spin-off that I ever came up with for Fostered was called Alanis. And in Alanis, Lonan actually does become a bit of a father. He ends up taking care of, it's not his biological child, but it was something that really meant a lot to him. And it was a really interesting relationship that I liked to develop back when I was planning this, that I'm never, gonna write now. So the fact that it's kind of recurred again, like once again in Feeding Habits, it makes a lot of sense, but it wasn't something that I was expecting. I don't know why. Maybe it's because like I'm kind of similar to their age. Obviously, I'm not that much younger than my boys. And also, like, I've grown up with them. So I was like, parenthood, y'all aren't going to want that because you're so young. But at the same time, like, no, it makes a lot of sense for his character. So as you can see, this is not going well, but I will fix it. Lonan really, really, really wants to be a dad, and I would one day like to actually give him that opportunity, but we'll have to see where the series takes us. Every single time I make plans, Feeding Habits is like, girl, no, those are the incorrect plans. Literally, every single time I do. I just made plans on how to finish this book, and then out of nowhere, I start writing Seventh Virtue, which changes a whole bunch of stuff in, how I was thinking about writing the canon and Feeding Habits. So one thing that I also love about Feeding Habits is my ability to get really like micro almost on quite large topics. So there's a lot of perspective in Feeding Habits about things such as death, what it really means to be like alive. There's a lot of the conversation throughout the book about pretty, big topics. And I really like that I don't take that as a huge abstract form, but I'm still able to like experiment with them and to use those words in this fiction without like freaking out. Like if you're a writing major, we know that we're supposed to hate like abstractions and we're really not supposed to use them, but learning how to kind of like reclaim abstractions and to like kind of play around with how can this thematically work has been pretty fun also, I would say. I do love a lot about this book despite like it being very difficult for me to talk about. I think it's something that I'd love to hear your opinions on. Like, what does it feel like to love something that you hate so much? It really disappointed me because there's always a point after I write a book where I hate it and I'm really embarrassed of it and I'm like, I don't want to talk about it ever again. With Mothwork, it happened maybe about 2 months after I finished it. But with Feeding Habits, because it's taken me over a year to write, it happened while I was still writing the book. So I'm still writing the book, but I'm in this mind space where I'm quite embarrassed of it. And I feel like it is bad. It's kind of hard to deal with while I'm writing the book. It's not really something that I was expecting to deal with. I mean, basically TLDR, I was not expecting to deal with any of this shit. I thought it was just going to be something fun that would cheer me up, but I somehow took that away from myself. And that's what I've really been learning is like, Rachel, how can you be kinder to yourself? Because Feeding Habits has also taught me that I can be really mean to myself. I don't tell myself that I've done a good job when I write Feeding Habits, even though I feel like in a lot of ways I have. I think because I share a lot of it, I feel hesitant to compliment myself, even though I know it's not what anybody would want. But those are just some thoughts. So I've gotten a brighter green and I'm just going to put that on the outside and then I'm going to kind of darken it up in just a second. This is actually from one of like the oldest e.l.f. products that I own. I don't know if anybody else has this. It's the e.l.f. Beach Beauty palette. This is probably not even safe to use on my eyes anymore, but like, oh well. What else do I love about this book? I love that it's been able to make me closer, I think, to my audience. I have never expected that I would have an audience for Fostered. By the time I was about 14, which I started Fostered when I was 13, I had come to terms with the fact that I would never have an audience for this book, and I was okay with that. It was a very premature, but very mature, I think, prematurely mature decision that I had made. I was like, I don't need anybody else to like this book because I love it. So what does it matter? I don't need to share it with the world in order to feel validated. And, it's not like everybody who's publishing work is only trying to get attention out of it. That's not what I'm saying, because I published my work too. But it was something where I, had accepted the fact that, this is not going to be a book that's traditionally published. I'm not interested in self-publishing it at all. And so I am going to just write it for myself. I'm okay with that. And that's cool. What's been interesting being on social media, Something that I actually didn't expect was that I do have an audience now for feeding habits. I have all of you who people send me in song recs that remind them of Lonan and Harrison. That is one of the most amazing experiences I have ever had, to have people who, like, they don't know me, they have not read the book, but when they hear a song, they think of my boys. Like, y'all don't even know, like, my boys bring me a lot of joy. They've helped me through very difficult times, but it means so much to me that people on the internet who don't actually, like, know me still care about what I'm doing, and also my characters and like what happens to them. And like, you know, on feeding habits chapters, I'm like, Mona needs therapy, and you guys are like, yeah. I really respect that you guys respect the choice that I've made to not publish this series, but still you're so invested in it. Like, I don't know what I did to deserve this beautiful audience that I call you guys. And did you see I just rubbed green onto my face? So really quick, I'm going to, because I finished the eye makeup, I'm just going to leave it at that. I feel like I could get too complicated with it, and it's looking fine. I didn't want it to look so yellow. I kind of wanted it to be more green, but honestly, I couldn't be bothered to fix it. So anyway, it's been an interesting process, I think, to write this book, knowing that I think I have accepted the fact that I'm not going to really enjoy writing it. Though at the same time, yesterday, I was writing Feeding Habits. Guys, I literally said, fuck clarity, I'm writing whatever I want. I do not care if it doesn't make sense. And it actually, I think I had a lot of fun doing it. I was listening to Nothing But Thieves' new song, Future Proof, and I just listened to it for 20 minutes straight while doing a writing sprint, and it was actually really fun when I didn't really think about like craft and like how to apply that. Because to be fair, like the scene that I was writing, like Lonan's not really in his right mind, so like why should I write it like he is, right? I think trying to find the small wins in a project that has given me a really hard time is really important. Kind of like it's something that I overlook because I'm like, it has to be perfect. It has to be exactly how I think it should be, even though there's no reason it needs to be that way. And what is should? Like, how do you know what something should be? So my camera died, so I've switched to my phone, and let's really quick finish up this makeup look, and also, you know, kind of a chat on, I don't know, I feel like this is kind of a chat on growing up, almost, in a lot of ways. I started moth work when I was in high school, and now I'm going into my third year, and I'm still not done feeding habits. So I think in a lot of ways, learning to accept that you're not perfect, or learning to accept that you're not always going to love everything you do, is kind of a lesson that I've been needing to learn, and to kind of stop pushing away so much, because it has been, like, in a lot of ways, my instinct to be like, well, this is difficult, so I don't want to accept the fact that this is going to be difficult. And something that I've been learning is that difficulties are kind of inevitable in a lot of ways in life, and so we kind of need to just accept when they come. Because in a lot of ways, like, I think my hatred of moth work, of feeding habits, comes from kind of like an immature place of like, well, what if people judge me? And I'm not saying that people having those thoughts are, you know, those people are intrinsically immature. No, I'm not saying that at all. But what I'm saying is like the constant need to please in a lot of ways, I feel like is coming a lot from like teenaged Rachel, like instead of like Rachel who's nearly in her 20s. Teenage Rachel's really taking over, I think, and she would definitely be the kind of person to be stressed all the time about what other people are thinking, and like, oh, is this like the best that I can do or whatever, when in reality what Rachel now wants to tell younger Rachel is, listen, it's fine, you're gonna be okay, it doesn't matter what other people think, what matters is, you know, what you think. So get those other voices kind of like out of your head and focus on the one that you're blessed to have, almost, in a way, is what I want to tell myself. Maybe that's what I needed to hear. That's sweet, right? So now that that's done, I'm going to really quickly put on some lipstick as blush. I'm using the brown one that I wore in the last video. I thought it would be nice to like kind of have more of like an earthy tone blush rather than like a red toned blush, so it's kind of more to bring just a slight slight color to the cheeks. But yeah, I did write Feeding Habits for the first time since, oh god, like sometime in January, yesterday, and I had a good time. And I think honestly I needed a reminder that I can have a good time. I was thinking about it today. I was like, so basically you're telling me that all I needed in order to write this book was like one good writing session. Like, I just need to write one good sentence in order to feel like I was capable. Huh, sounds fake, but okay. But what would I say to those of you who are also struggling, like how I'm currently and was struggling with feeding habits? You know what I would tell you? I would tell you that in a lot of ways, and I'm not trying to be like toxic positivity about this, the projects that you get are gifts in some way, even if, you know, they don't feel like it, and even if they never feel like it, because there's always something to learn, and I think learning is basically almost always something to be treasured. So if you're in a position where I am, and I'm also talking to myself, and you're really struggling with liking what you're doing and accepting yourself and accepting what you're putting out into the world, remind yourself that the fact that this project has come to you means that you are capable of doing something with it. It doesn't mean you're capable of finishing it or writing it to be a New York Times bestseller, but you're capable of doing something with it because it's here for you. Take it as an opportunity to learn, and you know, it's hard for me to take my own advice in that, but I'm gonna go write Feeding Habits after this, and I'm gonna try to remind myself that it is okay to be an imperfect person. It is okay to struggle to like what you like, but it's also okay to eventually accept yourself. That I think is what is really important. It is okay to be like, listen, I really don't like how I'm feeling about this right now, but I also love myself and I know that I am worthy of love. So even if I keep telling myself something over and over again, like, I hate this project, you suck at writing, over and over again, I know that these are my thoughts. They're my thoughts and I'm allowed to have them. You can't control your thoughts. In a lot of ways, I've really wanted to stop feeling like crap every single time that I write Feeding Habits. But I was talking to my psychologist this last week about this, and she's talking about pain and how, you know, humans often don't want to feel pain. But, you know, in a lot of ways, and I'm not saying that you need to feel pain, but sometimes we have to accept where we are, and sometimes where we are isn't where we want to be. But accepting where we are right now is going to allow us to evolve. And so I think that's kind of what I want to tell myself. Like, allow yourself to evolve, bitch. Like, by not being so mean to yourself right now, you can allow yourself to move on. And in a lot of ways, I didn't want to move on from disliking Feeding Habits. I think I just wanted to continue, and I still do want to continue hating it, because if I do, then nothing anybody else says about it can bother me, because I've already said the most. When in reality, sometimes we're literally our own worst enemies, and we could probably do a lot more good in this world if we, you know, learn to be kinder to ourselves. And I say that as I am somehow going to curse my bangs for doing this. So that's going to be the end of this video. That's been pretty rambly. This is the final eye look. I do wish it was like slightly darker. It is quite like bam yellow, but I guess I don't really have the right like gold. Thank you so much for being here for this ramble. I believe in you if you are having a hard time, and it's okay to have a hard time, because sometimes it can feel like I just want to stop having a hard time, but what do you do when you're in it? It's okay if you're there right now. I'm sending you all my love, all of my support, so many good vibes your way. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you in another one. Bye!